Good morning, friends, and a very happy President's Day to you all. This is the beginning of our webinar for the welcome event for Black History Month. So what is our Black History Month? Well, every month there is a theme for Black History Month. This year's theme is Black Health and Wellness. So it's only natural that we would try to create some programming to educate and collaborate with all of you. So we created some free virtual public lectures and workshops centered on Black health, Black wellness, traditional healing practices. And this was conceived by a diverse collection of healthcare workers, artists, community activists, organizations who are Black, white, brown, allies, the whole spectrum. So we have 6 days of programming, June 21st to 25th and 28th. You can find the list of programming at theblackproject.org/Black History 2022. And it is my immense pleasure to have the opportunity to introduce Carla Carten, PhD. She is the Interim Senior Vice President and Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer of the Mass General Brigham. She has a PhD in Organizational Behavior, a Master's in Organizational Development. Carla, or Dr. Carten, has been doing this work for so many years. She's an expert in it. She is leading in this space. She's presented nationally, internationally. She has worked with all number and types of groups. And, we're very proud to have her here today to offer some opening remarks. So without further ado, Dr. Carten.
Thank you. Thank you, Daniel. Good morning. I'd like to welcome you all to the Black Literacy and Arts Collaborative Project's Week of Black History Month programming. As Daniel mentioned, my name is Carla Carten, and I'm the Interim Vice President and Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer for Mass General Brigham. Mass General Brigham's Office of DE&I works through collaborative partnerships to incorporate equity into all of our collective work. We focus our efforts through key areas such as strategy, education, communication, consulting, organizational change and employee engagement, talent acquisition, and much, much more. This year's timely theme for Black History Month, selected by the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, is Black Health and Wellness. This theme acknowledges the legacy of Black scholars and medical practitioners in Western medicine and throughout the African diaspora. Reflecting on my life and career in diversity, equity, and inclusion over the past few decades, I recognize how imperative it is for all of us to attend to our mental and physical health for our own sake, for the sake of our families and our loved ones. I hope you all enjoy the wonderful programming offered this week to empower and uplift our wellness. This week's events bring together a number of local Black health and wellness groups, advocacy groups, Black thinkers, Black innovators, and allies of all races. Together, we come together to learn from one another with the goal of creating a healthier world. As many of you know, we are at a tipping point where the generational trauma Black Americans face as the result of systemic racism is being addressed unlike ever before. I am grateful for my community that even as we have faced these traumas over decades, those traumas have never stopped us from striving to improve the world around us. We must give praise to the strength of our resilience, our intelligence, our drive and passion to thrive no matter what challenges and obstacles we face. Black History Month gives us the opportunity to celebrate our collective strength as we recognize, heal, and grow through the traumas of racism. Mass General Brigham is one of many institutions that could no longer ignore the reality of Black people's lived experiences in this country. In 2020, there were thousands of our employees throughout our entire system that demanded that Mass General Brigham not only acknowledge this reality, but put forth actions to address it. So, in the fall of 2020, Mass General Brigham established our United Against Racism strategy. The United Against Racism strategy, also known as UAR, is our long-term, multi-million-dollar commitment to address the many impacts that racism has on our patients, our employees, and our broader community. We are committed to addressing the public health issue of systemic racism as it impacts our patients, our workforce, and the communities we serve. Working collectively, we are taking action across the Mass General Brigham Health System to dismantle racism and to learn as we do so. In our first year of work, established under UAR, we tackled several priorities to dismantle racism present within our system, in both our clinical settings and in our workforce. One initiative we undertook was mobilizing our community care. We recognize that some patients are more comfortable in a community setting than in a hospital. Therefore, Mass General Brigham has expanded an initiative that began during COVID to bring mobile care into communities. We have partnered with community organizations to deliver thousands of meals in Chelsea, Revere, and other Boston communities. This mobile program has also administered thousands of COVID-19 tests and vaccines. Mass General Brigham leaders plan to build upon this program, this promising model of community care, to drive better outcomes in all of our neighborhoods, and particularly our underserved neighborhoods. Understanding that racism has many impacts on patients and employees alike, Mass General Brigham launched Stepping Stones in August of last year. Stepping Stones is an anti-racism educational program designed to help employees understand how racism exists and functions in our society and how it affects us, our patients, our colleagues, our organizations, our workplaces, and our communities. Additionally, all of the system's top leaders have completed an additional executive briefing course entitled Race Conversations. To build a culture of health equity improvement, leaders of Mass General Brigham hospital departments identified health inequities in their organizations and applied for grants to address them. A selection committee funded 18 grants to reduce racial disparities in patient outcomes and in patient experience. These included everything from reducing disparities in the use of physical restraint in emergency departments to improving access to mental health treatment for non-English speaking trauma survivors. We know we cannot bring change without addressing hiring, promoting, and retaining a more racially diverse workforce. In a state that is 24% racially diverse, and specifically in Boston, a city that is represented by a majority of people of color, Mass General Brigham lacks diverse talent, with Black, Latino, Latina, Latinx, and Native American employees representing only 11.6% of managers and 7% of doctors. This disadvantages the people that we are here to serve. As part of the Diverse and Inclusive Hiring Pilot Program launched at the Brigham and Women's Hospital in 2021, interview panels for director level and above positions actively promote gender and racial diversity. This has helped to diversify talent at leadership levels, and now the process is expanding across our system and across all of our organizations. Additionally, this past year, Mass General Brigham Finance Department piloted an effort to identify and support racially and ethnically diverse employees. Informed by these learnings, there are plans to launch new efforts to retain and promote top talent across the system. Leaders will be equipped to identify and empower all talent through mentorship. To improve access to care of our patients, we hired bilingual digital access coordinators who collectively speak Spanish, Portuguese, Haitian Creole, Arabic, Russian, Mandarin, Cantonese, and Cape Verdean Creole. We have also translated our Patient Gateway platform into languages most commonly spoken by our patients. We recognized that we needed to address social determinants of health at greater levels. As a result, Mass General Brigham launched new screenings for food insecurity, housing needs, and other determinants of health across 22 primary care practices as one way to help reduce the impact of structural racism on health. Dozens of community workers have been hired in these clinics to connect patients to community resources for unmet health-related social needs. These efforts will focus on management of diseases with racial and ethnic disparities, including hypertension, diabetes, pediatric asthma, and enhanced prevention and early detection of some of the most persistent diseases and conditions facing communities of color. You know, this month always serves as a source of inspiration for me, a time to think more deeply about ways to make the world a better place for everyone. I am inspired by people who ask how they can help shape movements that will benefit all of us. I am thankful to be a member of the committed action of those who have demanded progress and held their ground. I am moved by the courage of those who challenge the status quo, those who will continue to challenge opposition for building racial justice. Being Black in America and doing this work is hard. And at times cynicism whispers in my ear. But knowing that I am part of a Black community who understands my joy, my pain, my hope, and gives me faith and inspiration to keep moving forward actually allows me to keep moving forward. I'd like to thank you all for joining the Black Literacy and Arts Collective Project Series, a series of hosted events this entire week. I hope you will find inspiration and I hope you will find joy this month. The breadth of our wellness will only continue to grow and flourish as we continue to celebrate the Black experience. Thank you. And now we'll continue with our show and the program.
Thank you very much, Dr. Carten. Always a pleasure to have you. Now, I should mention that the views expressed by the speakers and the workshop organizers do not necessarily reflect the views or the opinions of the organizing groups. All programming will use the Zoom meeting and Zoom webinar formats. The webinar format, you may notice, has the chat function disabled. This is to prevent any unexpected interruptions. It's not that we don't want to hear you. If you do have questions, you can send those questions through the question and answer function in the Zoom webinar. All right, now I really would love to thank the Black Literacy and Arts Collaborative Project. They are this amazing group centered in Boston, aimed at delivering resources in the literacy and arts spaces to communities of color. They have mentorship programs. They have the storytelling to build medical trust with a number of medical institutions and medical organizations. They have the Spread the Love program where they work with individuals to just spread messages of love. They also have book giveaways. You can hear about them from the Black Project website. Similarly, this was put together in part with the People's Heart. This is a healthcare institution and community art and placemaking collaboration. The mission of the People's Heart is to change institutional healthcare culture and empower underserved patients and communities of color through art and design. Programming includes art on walls, workshops, lectures, pop-ups, health events. Again, you can find them on the People's Heart. Now, to discuss some of the amazing groups we have going on this week, quick rundown of events. So now we have our welcome event. After this, we have a discussion on herbalism and Chinese medicine. Then from 3 to 3:30, we have a dance class. You can just log in, get out of your chair, get some exercise. For those of you at home, a lot of this programming is also appropriate for the family. So you have the opportunity to, learn some stuff with your kids. From 3:30 to 4:30, we have the Poetry and Pieces workshop. Think of this as a book club. You have the opportunity to get together with mentors, and the way it works is they will read poetry and some excerpts from literature, and then you have the opportunity to discuss the findings, and through that, you can explore identity. These are a lot of fun, and they're really low stress. Everyone's always enjoyed these events, so you should definitely try to check out that Poetry and Pieces workshop. Tuesday, we have Care with Christine. This is Christine Rose, who is a licensed massage therapist. She'll be running some wellness events, just a little 30 minutes, something to kind of get that breath flowing, get that mindset right for the day. Then noon on Tuesday, we have Sarah King. She's an NIH fellow. Dr. King is going to be speaking on the biopsychosocial impact of art and neurobiology of stress, an awareness-based approach to healing intergenerational trauma. That is a mouthful. It sounds crazy. Essentially, what she has done is she is working on a format to use art as a way to address intergenerational trauma, which is centered on communities of color. After that, from the 6 to 7 o'clock, we have discussion from this group called the Poetry of Science. They brought together artists, poets, and scientists and created this exhibition of really deep down understanding of the motivations of the scientists and normalize people of color in science, but also go on to inspire the next generation of scientists. Wednesday, we have another morning little yoga experience. This is with Lisa Leung Tiat. Then we have social healing through conversation with Lucas Johnson and Erica Wilson. We have Proud to be American, the art and life of Joe Diggs. Joe Diggs is an artist in the Cape area, and his family compound has been a resort area for the Black community for generations. In fact, it was noted in the Negro Motorist's Green Book of historical fame. Then we have Frontiers in Equity, where we will talk about some up and coming research and projects kind of aimed at using hospital resources, bringing them into the community. These are from people in the Boston area and beyond, kind of doing this work across the United States. Then we have on Thursday, we start off the day again, breathing exercises, centering ourselves, finding one another. Then at noon, we have another one of these Poetry and Pieces workshop. This one will be focused on visual arts. All you need to do to come to these things is just be willing to look, listen, and discuss. You'll have the opportunity to look at pieces of art and discuss what they mean to you. And from that discussion, you have the opportunity to come to a sense of self and explore identity. Then from 3 to 4 on Thursday, we have At the Heart, Planning with the Community. This is an opportunity to discuss with health equity workers about what issues there are in the community and brainstorm on ways in which we can address those things. Then from the Black Project, at 7 to 8, we have Overcoming Imposter Syndrome in Black Women. Friday, we have another centering exercise. We have our Black History Month keynote address with Dr. Hassan Jeffries. Dr. Hassan Jeffries from The Ohio State University. He's an amazing speaker, amazingly inspirational. He focuses on the concept of hard history. And he has this amazing TED Talk. If you haven't heard of Hassan Jeffries or had the opportunity to listen to him, I highly recommend that you take the opportunity to do it. Then we have Cooking in Context, or Context in Cooking, from the Stinging Nettles Brewhas. Stinging Nettles Brujas are a group of healthcare workers and community workers in the community who practice wellness across the whole spectrum. They hold cooking classes and demos. They hold educational events for the community. They hold wellness events for the community, product drives. These are the people that are on the ground out in the community day in and day out trying to make the world better. And so, having the opportunity to learn from them is an amazing experience. Saturday and Sunday, of course, we don't have any official programming, but you should just go out there, visit Black Boston, whatever that means to you. In this time of COVID, obviously it's been difficult for all of us, but Black entrepreneurship has dropped by, I believe, 40%. And that's hard, right? That's everything that is affecting our communities in the United States are especially felt in communities of color. And so this is an opportunity for you to reflect and think about how you can make a sustainable change to your purchasing habits, and think about how those changes can affect local businesses, right? We always are talking about acting locally. We're always talking about, going to farmers market and supporting local businesses. This is an opportunity to, with your purchasing habits, support Black businesses, support businesses of color, right? Just try to think about your purchasing habits, see if there's a sustainable change you can make. Of course, Monday, we have Dee Dee's Cry, Mental Health and Survivorship in Communities of Color. Again, Dee Dee's Cry is an organization that is focused on providing mental health resources to survivors of suicide and to prevent suicide. They're an amazing group, again, local to Boston. And then we have Ideas, Arrangement, and Effects, System Thinking and Social Justice for the Design Studio for Social Intervention. This is a arts and science collaboration that try to get involved in civic discussions and civic issues and create sustainable changes as we continue to develop the Boston and beyond landscape. Now, it's my pleasure to actually throw this conversation next to an amazing ally. This is Irina Cooper. Irina Cooper is a certified acupuncturist. She's been doing this work for a long time. She herself is an immigrant, and she has lived the immigrant experience. Her story is interesting. Her knowledge is perhaps just as interesting. This is an opportunity for, as we begin to think about, what that health and wellness 365 means, to use that as an opportunity to learn. Part of the Black History Month mantra this year, just as health and wellness, is moving beyond the standard, what we would call Western approaches to medicine, and opening it up to this concept of birth doulas, death doulas, community health workers, traditional healers. And for many individuals, especially those who feel reticent in engaging our clinical systems, they turn to these other groups, organizations, practices to receive some level of care, be that your acupuncturist, your massage therapist, your church, right? All of these things come together and form the health of a person, right? These are the social determinants of health. And to have this opportunity to expand our understanding is going to be immensely helpful as we look beyond and figure out how we can address these issues of health equity in the future. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to send it over to Irina Cooper. Should mention that the views expressed by the speakers and the workshop organizers do not necessarily reflect the views or the opinions of the organizing groups.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. First of all, thank you so much for having me present at this wonderful event. My name is Irina Cooper. I have been practicing acupuncture for 11 years, and I am the director of a clinic I founded, which is called Whole Beauty and Health. So what we'll talk about today is a little bit about the principles of traditional Chinese medicine and what the heart actually does in Chinese medicine's point of view, which is not at all the same or not entirely the same as in the Western medicine point of view. We'll talk about certain conditions that we see on an everyday basis, and also how the heart works together in accord with other organs in the body. And then I will give you some case examples that I've seen that are not necessarily something very common. Of course, as you can imagine, in 11 years of practice, I've seen my share of palpitations, insomnia and such, but once in a while you come across the case that makes you stop and think. And we'll talk about those cases at the end. So a couple of words about myself. As I mentioned, I have been practicing acupuncture and Chinese herbal medicine since 2011. I did go to China a few years back in Beijing, and I also visited Shanghai. They have a wonderful Chinatown in the center of Shanghai, and their pharmacies are amazing. Prior to my journey in Chinese medicine, I actually was in technology. And I have a master's in information systems and business from Northeastern University. But then I had a change of heart, and I decided to explore the world of Chinese medicine. And from the first moment I stepped my foot in the School of Acupuncture, I never ever looked back. I love what I do. As far as special training, my most special condition to treat is Lyme disease. It is one of those things that unfortunately is not well understood, and super horrible. People lose their lives to this condition, but I am able to return their lives back and literally get them out of wheelchairs sometimes. In addition to that, I've had some special training in thyroid conditions and weight loss. I work with children, men, women, and fibromyalgia, and one of those conditions that's actually super easy to fix just with diet. But people suffer, and all they need to do is listen to my suggestions, and they usually pick up and go. Chronic fatigue syndrome, ADHD in children, those are the other areas that I work a lot with. But again, in Chinese medicine, since it views the whole body, there is no such thing as a specialty. We can work with certain types of patients, but we don't specialize as such on anything, or at least we shouldn't. I'm not here at all to diminish the importance of Western medicine. It certainly has very powerful surgical procedures and emergency techniques. I have had cases when people come into my office and I turn them away and send them to the nearby emergency room. Life-saving procedures, of course, are there, and we should definitely take advantage of Western techniques. If somebody has an urgent problem, they absolutely should go to their doctor. And of course, the Western medicine offers wonderful maintenance or, acceptable maintenance ways of treating a condition. But if we look at the difference between the Western medicine and the traditional Chinese medicine, the traditional Chinese medicine looks at how the organs work together in the body. No organ, no body part is isolated or alone. Versus in Western medicine, they typically focus at the site of the problem or the function of the individual organ. As far as how Chinese medicine came about, nobody knows the exact date, but they time the origin of Chinese medicine to approximately 5,000 years ago. And they use needles that were made out of fish bones and rocks to time how long this system has been present. The legend of how it came about actually has to do with somebody who had a migraine. And this person, according to the legend, was pacing back and forth in pain because the migraine was so bad. And out of desperation, he kicked a rock with his foot and the migraine stopped. And that made him wonder what happened, which is how the initial liver channel was discovered, because it begins on the big toe of the foot. So if the person kicked the rock with the big toe of the foot, the migraine went away if it was a liver type migraine. They also observed, of course, how animals treated themselves if they were sick. Sometimes the herbs were discovered just by viewing the animals and what they were doing, if their bellies were bloated or if they were throwing up and such. Also, we are a part of nature, so we will talk about this a little bit further, but the Chinese system of medicine uses the nature to discuss our body and what happens within our bodies. So I'm sure most of you have seen this diagram in one shape or another. There is the darkness and there is the lightness, and the darkness corresponds to yin. Yin stands for inside, negative, cool, calm, stillness. It's the nighttime. And it's the softness, whereas the yang stands for the opposite of that, the male energy, the light, the movement, the heat, and the hardness, the outside, the top. And of course, we need both. To be balanced, we need both, and we need both of these to be in balance, excuse me. And ultimately, the imbalance of these two elements is what begins the disease. When there is too much heat or too much cold or too much hardness or too much softness and such, and then if there is a void, then the other element will fill in, which is how we end up with an imbalance. Okay, so in Chinese medicine, no organ is isolated. And this diagram shows quite well how all organs are connected. There are two cycles. The one on the outside is the generating cycle, excuse me, which means that each organ generates the energy for the next, but also takes the energy from the previous. And then the cycle that's inside, that looks a little bit like a 5-pointed star, that is the control cycle. That means that each organ controls the energy of the next. The organs that are on the inside of the circle are what we call yin organs. And yin organs control or produce something. The organs that are on the outside, that are partnered with our yin organs, are called yang organs. And yang organs fill and empty. That is their function. And they work in partnership with the yin organ. So if we look at the very top, that will be the main focus of our discussion today, which will be the heart. The heart is a yin organ, and it's partnered with small intestine, which is the yang organ. And the heart gives the energy to the spleen and stomach pair. It controls the lungs, but it is controlled by the kidneys. So that is how it's all connected. As you can see, the liver is the generating organ of the heart. Nothing is isolated. It's all connected, which is what makes this system so beautiful. Let's see here. Okay, so if we look at the heart, in the Western view, the function of the heart is to pump the blood, and it generates the pressure to transport the blood throughout the body. However, in the Chinese medicine view, it also, of course, pumps the blood, no question about that, but it's the commander-in-chief of all organs by governing the blood and vessels. It centers our mind and consciousness, and it stores our spirit. The sensory organ of the heart is the tongue. And the heart is affected and affects other organ functions, which are mainly the lung, the spleen, the kidney, and liver. Because as you saw in the previous slide, they're also connected, also close to one another. So if we look at somebody with a healthy heart, we have a person with a good blood circulation, normal blood pressure, good digestion, good facial complexion, good and adequate expression of emotions, and somebody who sleeps very well. If we look at somebody with a weak heart, of course, we will have some circulation issues, palpitations, the facial color might be less than perfect, the person will have trouble sleeping, anxiety or tendency to depression, digestive issues, tongue sores, and speech disorders. I mentioned earlier that the Chinese use the nature to describe us because we are a part of nature. So just to break it down a little bit before we dive into the depths of the heart, the elements of nature which affect the heart are water and phlegm essentially is water that gets stuck and accumulates, and also fire. As far as the body disharmonies that affect the heart, we have stagnation, which is ultimately where blood doesn't move properly. We have blood deficiency, which in Western terms would be called anemia, Qi deficiency, which is not enough of energy, Yin deficiency, not enough coolness, Yang deficiency, not enough heat, and Yang collapse, which is, that's when the person needs to go to the hospital. If we look at heart fire, the symptoms that we'll observe in the person, of course, are palpitations, because heat creates movement. If you imagine water, when the water is hot, it boils, it moves. That is where the analogy is here. The person will be thirsty. The person will develop tongue sores. The person will be restless. The face will be red. The person might have a bitter taste in the mouth and difficulty sleeping because, again, if there is a lot of fire, there's a lot of movement and heat. The sleep time is the opposite of that. So if there is too much fire, insomnia will be a big factor. If we look at phlegm and phlegm fire, so phlegm very often causes high cholesterol and atherosclerosis. Phlegm has to do with a spleen involvement. The spleen is the organ that has to do with transforming of fluids in the body. And if the spleen is weak, the fluids will ultimately get stuck, in rough words. And that is where the phlegm comes in. Phlegm can manifest in things like congestion, cysts, fibromyalgia is a type of phlegm, and also can affect the mind, which we will talk about in a little bit. If we have heart fire with the symptoms of phlegm, we will have mental confusion and incoherent speech, manic depression, and sometimes inadequate reactions to outside factors where we can't stop laughing, can't stop crying. If we add the passage in the fire here, we can have phlegm misting the mind, which is the mental confusion. Very often I see this pattern in children with autism, where the thinking is unclear and it's impossible to figure out the thought process of an individual. And that is where the speech disturbances come in, which leads to stuttering, or sometimes we can have an inability to speak, which is called tongue-tied. If we have heart blood stagnation, that is where the person will have angina and chest oppression with pain, palpitations, and perhaps pain in the left arm. Certainly this would require a medical assistance in a hospital. If somebody is blood deficient, that is actually not so difficult to fix. The person would have palpitations, dizziness, bad sleep, anxiety, poor memory. The facial complexion would be dull, and also cold hands and feet, which I'm sure either you yourself experienced or you know somebody who always has cold hands and feet, no matter how warm it is outside. The heart Qi deficiency would have a lot of the same symptoms of blood deficiency, but also spontaneous sweating would be a factor. With yin deficiency, if you remember, yin stands for coolness and calmness. So this is where the person would have night sweats and sweaty palms and feet and thirst because there is too much heat, as well as a rapid heartbeat. With yang deficiency, you would have the opposite, not enough fire in the body. So you would have cold limbs and bright pale face and a slow heartbeat. And yang collapse is the ultimate sort of bad news. That is where the person needs to be hospitalized, where the heart basically has no life force and the person needs immediate medical attention. So how can we help ourselves? Believe it or not, a lot of it has to do with diet. And if you have a tendency to phlegm or various types of phlegm in your body, the first order of business is to stop all dairy. And believe me, I hear this every day, at least a dozen times, but I love my cheese and wine. Well, yes, but it's not great for you. Add to your diet damp-resolving foods. I listed some over here: aduki beans, orange peel tea. All you do is you peel an orange or a tangerine or citrus of your choice and boil it. And you can add some honey if you'd like to sweeten and drink it. Fennel seeds are also fabulous for dampness. If you have blood deficiency, which in Western terms called anemia, the number one thing to do is to eat beets. And I'm not talking about the canned beets that you can buy in a supermarket. Go to the produce section and buy an actual beet root. And you boil it like you would a potato until a fork goes in there with no problem. It's actually quite delicious. It's sweet, and it is by far the best blood nourishing food you can find. Also, longan fruit, it is seasonal. It's available in Chinatown during the season. I believe in the spring. You can also buy it dried and canned. It tastes like grapes, but it's fantastic for nourishing blood of the brain. It also is super helpful in affecting the memory. In my practice, I recommend it often, and very often the husband will call after the wife started to eat the longan fruit and complain that now the wife remembers everything, and he doesn't necessarily like it because every fight, every argument, she remembers now everything. If we talk about a heart Qi deficiency, then there is no magic here, you just need to move more. And then the yin deficiency, we just need to cool our body a bit. So increase yin nourishing foods or cooling foods, such as mint, red Chinese dates, watermelon is also wonderful, and perhaps reduce the hot in nature food, ginger, garlic, and such. I think it skips, oh, here we go. No, okay. So there are a couple of points that we can easily massage on ourselves that actually are quite helpful. The number one is called Heart 8. It is wonderful for heat signs or insomnia. And you find it very easily on the palm of your hand if you make a loose fist and identify the point where your pinky ends. You use something piercing but pointed to massage this point, such as a key or retractable pen. And you just press in there and rotate, and you will see how quickly you'll be able to calm down if you're worked up or stressed out or unable to fall asleep. The other one is conception vessel 17. This one is very easy to locate at the sternum on your chest bone, approximately leveled with the fourth rib. But when we needle this point, we don't go by location necessarily. We go by where it is mostly sore or unpleasant. Depending on your symptoms, if you feel nausea or a little bit of a panic attack, then you want to use the downward motion of your finger to press down on your chest, or also for cough, it would be very helpful. If you just feel anxious or you feel a tight chest, then massaging it with a clockwork motion would work. And I'm sure if some of you feel your chest bone right now, you will identify that extra sore place, and that is your conception vessel 17. Kidney 1, that is what you would go for a foot massage for. It's on the sole of your foot. It is actually super effective for anything where the energy is stuck up and not descending as it should descend. I often recommend to my patients with headaches or asthma or any of those disorders, even cough or panic attacks, to just fill the tub with hot water, as hot as you can stand, sit on the edge of the tub with your feet in the hot water, and just observe how things will literally settle. Of course, you can also massage it with something non-piercing but pointing. Another point, which I'm sure you have seen before, is called yin tongue, which is located in the center of the forehead between the eyebrows. It is a fantastic point, super easy to massage. I use it for anxiety, lack of focus. Also, it's quite helpful for eye problems or sometimes sinus congestion. And you massage it with your finger, no need to use a pencil or whatever you decide to use. And it does work, it calms people down. Now, with that, to conclude, I would like to give you a few interesting cases which I've seen. Again, as I mentioned in the beginning, these are definitely not all of the cases I've seen over 11 years of practice, but these are cases that are just interesting. And these are cases where a Western doctor would not look at the heart, but I was able to literally cure the person by addressing the source issue, which is the heart. The number one is a girl named Lily. So when she came to my office, and this was, I want to say, maybe 4 years ago, maybe 3.5, she was 12, but the problem began at the age of 4. There was something that happened with in the kindergarten. Her main complaint was stuttering. And whatever happened in the kindergarten, we'll never know. But when the parents went back to get her things in the kindergarten, she saw the building from the car and cried, and she began stuttering. When they came to me, she was in school. The issue was that because of the stuttering, of course, she was not very active in class. The friends were teasing her. She did not want to go to school. So my treatment principle was to tonify heart yin, which is to calm things down and subdue the shock, whatever the shock was, which again, we'll never know what happened in the kindergarten, and free the tongue, since the tongue is the sensory organ of the heart. After 3 treatments, the girl was super happy. She said that she felt free. She was able to raise her hand and be more active in class, and the children stopped teasing her. But the mom was still unhappy because Lily was still refusing to recite Russian poems at home. And I said to her, in all honesty, that it was way above my pay grade. I had no knowledge of any needles or herbs that would make the girl be more willing to recite Russian poems. And I said, I believe I've done all I can do for you, good luck. That was semi-humorous, of course, but this was a great success, particularly if we're talking about a child. This lady here, Sharon, at the age of 42, her main complaint was a fingernail on her pinky, which kept on breaking and peeling. And she went to the doctor. They cleared her for any type of fungus or any kind of disease that could be causing it. And she didn't know why. She was saying it was painful, that she had to use the nail filer until it was almost bleeding. As I was asking her, the history of illness was discovered that approximately a year prior, she had to hospitalize her mother, or rather she had to move her mom from a comfortable living situation to something a lot less favorable, which was a shocking and very sad event. And then our bodies do remember, and a year after that, this is when the symptoms began. The reason is significant that it's the pinky finger, not any other finger, is because the heart channel ends on the pinky, which immediately led me to look at the heart. So my treatment for her was to calm the spirit, do some spirit points to release the grief and shock, because obviously this is what caused it. After just a couple of treatments, she reported that the nail stopped breaking and she was able to get a manicure, which was fantastic, of course. This patient, one of my favorite cases of all, a retired gynecologist. So her thing was she went to a dentist 5 months prior to seeing me, and the dentist cut up her tongue during the procedure. When she came to see me, she was fully healed from the trauma, from the physical trauma, but her tongue was getting tired, and she said, "My darling, I cannot even say a good toast." So my treatment principle was to work on the entire heart channel, because obviously it was affecting the tongue. After the first treatment, she came back super happy, and she said, "It's better, but it still gets tired when I talk, but it's get tired on the front left third." And I said, "Dr. Isabella, we have to go local." And she said, "What does that mean?" And I said, "Exactly what you think it means." And she said, "Do you know how?" And I said, "Sure." So I did a local treatment. I needled the front left third of her tongue, which was the first and probably last time I'll ever do it. But the bottom line is she never returned, and she was super happy with the result. This patient here is also a lovely gentleman, Juan, at the age of 63. His main complaint was hiccups. And when we talked about the history, he said it began in 1996 when he married a Russian woman and started to drink alcohol. And my question was, have you considered not drinking alcohol? But he couldn't. So my treatment principle was to open the chest and move the dampness. After one treatment, he said that he felt great. But then he came back after about 5 or 6 months when the Russian neighbor on a hot summer day gave him beer, and he started to hiccup again. And I did a treatment and I said, "Just stop drinking and don't come back." These are cases where they make you giggle, but they also make you question or realize how everything is connected in our body, and how sometimes a seemingly unrelated event or an unrelated dietary change can cause an interesting change in the body. So with that, that is all I have. If anybody has any questions, how do I view the questions, or how do I know the questions? I'm happy to answer.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I will actually hand those questions to you if they pop up in the chat.
Okay.
I'll ask you to stop sharing your screen if you're able. And then I actually had some interesting questions for you. This was, a really lovely talk. It was a great introduction to the space.
I need to figure out how to stop sharing my screen.
There should be an option near the top to allow you to do it.
Yes. Okay.
All right, great. I'll just pop this as well.
Yep.
And then I'll stop this. Great, thank you so much. And then I will bring us here. Wonderful. And, this was a very interesting talk and a kind of a great introduction to the topic. I was wondering, I know that hospitals now use acupuncture, and does hospital acupuncture differ from acupuncture in the community?
So I did 2 hospital rotations. One was in Boston Medical Center in the heart of Boston, where I worked primarily with children. My youngest patient was 9 hours old.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I almost got kicked out because I was crying in the beginning nonstop, but then you kind of have to compose yourself and stop thinking of this 9-hour-old baby as a 9-hour-old baby, but begin thinking of them as a patient with patterns and what you do for the patient. The other internship I did was in Shattuck Mental Institution, which is in Jamaica Plain. Does it differ? Not really. I mean, when I worked at BMC, it was the family clinic. So when you work in a family community or the family clinic setup, you will see certain patterns. Also, if you work in an inner city hospital, you will see things that you will not see in Newton Wellesley.
Mm-hmm.
This setup, of course, is different because you use hospital beds and hospital rooms. We did not do intensive care unit, but we did people who were discharged or about to be discharged with, just any type of infection, acute bronchitis, asthma. I did see a shaken baby syndrome, which I wish I didn't see. Pretty tragic things. In Shattuck Mental Hospital, we saw people with addictions, heroin, just about anything. There was a prison floor, so occasionally we treated inmates with physical injuries for pain and such. But does it differ? I guess it differs in the sense how you set up your clinic versus a hospital setting. But then whoever comes in the door, you treat, except again for any type of urgent issues. And I have sent people away. I suspected a stroke. I suspected a brain concussion. And I just said, you belong in the emergency room across the way. Call me later. And occasionally you have to say no. Sometimes you get a patient that is literally above your pay grade and you're like, nope, cannot help you.
Now, in those cases, are your patients traditionally receptive to going to the emergency room or seeing their primary care physician, or do you have to really convince them?
Well, I haven't really had a case when I had to convince them, because I had a lady who came in and one of her pupils was tiny and the other was huge, which is one of the main symptoms of a concussion. And what made me upset actually about that is because that same week she saw 2 other doctors and they didn't look at her. And that made me really sad because that is such a no-brainer. And I said, did you have a fall? She said, yeah, I fell off my horse. And I said, you need to go to the emergency room, you need to be evaluated. This is not something I can do for you here, or I should do here. Another recent case was really high blood pressure. And I said, Mr. S, you need to go to the nearby emergency room. This could be life-threatening. I've never had a case where somebody said, no, I'm not going, treat me now.
And so do you check vitals at your clinic?
Well, yeah, I mean, we can do blood pressure. Also, just by observing, like, look in somebody's pupils. That literally takes very basic knowledge. My son knew this sign at the age of 10. If somebody's pupils are different, there is a reason for it. If we go back to this lady, she actually did not have a concussion. The reason her pupils were different was because prior to the fall, she had an eye surgery and the stitches gave when she fell. But again, that required a intervention. I'm not qualified to do eye stitches. So yeah, with the blood pressure, of course, we check the temperature. It really is not difficult to figure out if the person needs to go to the emergency room.
And then how much time do you typically spend with people who come to see you?
So the initial intake requires a full health history, and I spend as much time as necessary. Sometimes if you have a young, strong, robust person, all we need is 10 minutes or even less because they have no major conditions. Other times it needs 45, 50 minutes or more. Very often these days, because of the beginning of use of technology, people prefer to do the initial intake separately from the first session. So we connect in a similar manner we are connected now. And I go through the entire history. I have a ton of questions from the head hair, all the way down to toenails. We talk about everything. Then we go into the childhood conditions, because in my experience, absolutely every disease we have now as an adult comes from childhood. It just either wasn't treated fully or properly, or we tend to ignore minor pain because it doesn't bother us, but then it comes back with a vengeance. And then the full treatment or any treatment is about 45 minutes, up to an hour, but 45 minutes or so. So the first initial visit is in total about 90 minutes, which again can be broken down, but an acupuncture session is about 45 to 50 minutes.
And do you talk with them during the acupuncture sessions, or
I
is
love chatting with my patients.
Okay.
I stand with them like this, and we chat and we share stories. A lot of times I see anxiety, and in particular, people who are most anxious are young veterans. And I have veterans who come to see me at the age of 20, 22. They just came back from combat.
Mhm.
And they look at me in my white coat with needles, and they start hyperventilating and sweating and asking, does it gonna hurt? And I said, are you serious right now? I just came back from the desert dodging bullets, and you had 25 tattoos. But yes, I like talking to patients. With that said, though, a lot of times if the main complaint of the person is insomnia and they relax in my sessions, I step out, let them sleep. And if it's not a super busy day and I do not need the room, I peek in and I sit there still asleep and I leave. Or in the beginning of the session, I can ask them, do you have a time pressure? If you need to leave by a certain hour, of course, I'll get you out of here. But otherwise, consider just staying. And
Mhm.
sometimes they just sleep on my table. Then they wake up and they say, I feel like I had a week-long nap because they feel so refreshed.
So
It could not necessarily, pardon. Go
I was
ahead.
going to ask if these patients of yours find the discussion as helpful as the acupuncture.
That depends. I have a lot of men patients in my practice, but very few of them come in on their own. Typically, it's the women who drag them in, the neighbor, the wife, the daughter, the sister, and very often these gentlemen are skeptical, and they say, well, I don't believe in it, so it's not going to work, right? And I said, no, it doesn't matter if you believe in it. What matters is that you're here, you're open and willing. The rest of it, leave up to me. It works just as well. But if the person is open to it, they will have all sorts of questions. They will find it fascinating. If somebody is a skeptic, they say, just let me out of here, do what you need to do, and I want to go.
Mm-hmm. And do these individuals usually come back, or that?
They do, because they start to feel better. One of my very first patients from years and years ago was the mom of one of my friends who had asthma. And she said to me at that point that she hadn't slept in a week because she was surrounded by pillows on her couch, unable to take a full breath.
Mhm.
But she was a skeptic, and her daughter, a friend of mine, brought her to my office and left and said, call me when you're done. But this lady was saying, just call Tanya, have her pick me up, because I think it's all a little bit of BS, and I think it doesn't work. And I said, well, I'm not gonna. Let me do what I need to do, and then I'll call her in about 40 minutes. Sure enough, after 40 minutes, she was able to take an inhale, and then she came back. This was, I want to say, 10 years ago. So to this day, I get sometimes patients who were referred by her, and they all say, Laura said you helped her, but acupuncture is just crap. And yet she can breathe, and she sends people to me.
Mm-hmm. And so in your practice, you combine acupuncture and it sounds like herbalism as well, or at least dietary management.
So my practice is actually bigger, and I'm not sure, I think it skipped a slide because I was struggling with my buttons, but my practice has a total of 8 specialties. Acupuncture and herbs is what I do, and I have another acupuncturist that works with me. I also have physical therapy, occupational therapy, chiropractic, mental health, nutritional counseling, and speech therapy. So when a patient comes in, and pain is the #1 reason why people come in these days, mainly because all insurance companies are covering acupuncture for treatment of pain.
Mm-hmm.
So when somebody comes in, I often look, or always look, at what I can do for the patient, but also what other practitioners can do. For example, a chiropractor, for example, a physical therapist, and we work all together, which is what, as you began by introducing me, when you combine all of these non-invasive methods, it really does wonders. Non-invasive, that's my biggest thing. Of course, you sometimes need surgeries or medications, but if you can avoid them, That is the goal of my practice. I personally am super heavy on dietary changes. The number one example of that is fibromyalgia or any type of phlegm or congestion. All people need to do is stop the dairy. In the Western world, it is very pressed upon to eat as much milk or milk products as possible for calcium. But really, anybody who's past puberty should not be drinking milk. Milk is needed for growth, and our bodies don't process milk very well. In this culture, it's very predominant, but it is super easy to stop these very painful conditions like arthritis or asthma with productive cough or fibromyalgia just by stopping milk and cheese. And then, of course, as I mentioned in the presentation, add a little bit of mint, stop a little bit of coffee, whatever it is. Sometimes tweaking the diet really makes the world of difference. Herbal medicine is something very different. It's as wide as Milky Way. You need a separate master's degree to practice herbal medicine, which is not something everybody knows. And there are 9,500 single Chinese herbs, official. You take two of them together, that's a classical formula. I do not know how many formulas there are. But yes, I prescribe herbal formulas very often as well.
Now, I know, for instance, Mass General has the Benson Henry Mind Body Institute, where they work with patients on providing guidance on complementary medical practices. And, you know, since they don't, of course, have herbalism as far as I understand, but they will typically discuss with patients and say, you know, oh, you can find a provider in your community. Do you find that medical doctors or Western medical doctors are kind of guiding patients to you for acupuncture, for speech therapy, for herbalism at all?
So I find it becoming more prominent, but not quite as common as I'd like it to be. Occasionally, medical doctors are patients of mine when I fix difficult, from their point of view, medical conditions. An example I can give is a psychiatrist, a woman doctor who had chronic incontinence. Her main complaint was weight gain. And when she came to me and said, I want to lose weight, I said, there's no magic. You need to eat less and move more. And I said, I cannot move because I have horrible incontinence. I fixed that in 7 treatments. She had this condition for over 30 years. 7 treatments is all it took. She began referring patients to me because she was in awe at how I was able to help her where her medical community couldn't. Another example was actually my mom's primary care physician. My mom complained to her about vertigo when she couldn't get out of bed. Everything was spinning. And the doctor said to her, learn to live with it, be happy, you have no vomiting. I did 1 treatment on my mom. She went back and said, guess what? I have no vertigo anymore. That night I got a call from the doctor. Can I make an appointment? And so people like these, they refer patients to me. Also, I was actually pleasantly surprised. I did a lecture in Bournewood Mental Hospital in Jamaica Plain, and that was my first lecture in a medical hospital. I was terrified. I thought they would throw tomatoes at me because these are people who are Western trained. But I was pleasantly surprised by how curious and open they were. They came with questions. They knew somebody who had acupuncture. And people like these are becoming more and more open. With that said, the reason I was in Bournewood is because apparently these days doctors are required to have a certain number of hours of alternative medical training. And so the lecture they did, which was a surprise to me, but the lecture I did was a part of the units of the CE credits that they needed to do. So as they become more educated, at the very least, they become more open and they say, at least try. Frustration comes with oncology patients. When people undergo chemotherapy and all these really harsh procedures, and I know that there is one particular formula which has been heavily studied. There are numerous articles on NIH about this formula, and people who take these herbs are 70% less likely to lose their hair, lose the weight, become depressed but doctors don't let them take it. The reason, as they say, we will not know what works. But my view on it, who cares? Is your goal to find out what works, or is your goal to see yourself healthy on the other side of this? That's what kind of gets me a little bit upset, because people come into my office after chemo and they're just miserable. And I know I can help, but the doctors say no.
And so you would advocate for more communication, both with clinicians and from clinicians?
Well, I would advocate certainly for communication, but also to be a little bit more open-minded, because the doctors in this country do not receive a great deal of any other education but the Western techniques. But the Chinese, all these old remedies, they're not new and they do help. So I would advocate to be a little bit more open, see the goal. Unless the person is in a trial or some kind of study where you need to isolate all other influences, then by all means allow the person to take these harmless, very well-known herbs to let them feel better while they're undergoing this harsh treatment.
Mm-hmm. And have you had experiences where you've communicated directly with patients, physicians to discuss these issues?
Oh, absolutely. And again, doctors who will be, excuse me, open to speaking with me, they're typically open to acupuncture in general. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we speak a different language, sometimes we speak the same language. And sometimes they look at my report or the report that the patient gives them, they say, this is wonderful. The best example comes to mind right now is actually a friend of mine who is a gynecologist, and she works in St. Elizabeth's Hospital. She sends to me all of her patients with breech babies. I've only had one case when I couldn't flip the baby, and in that case, the cord was wrapped around the baby's neck. All other cases, I literally don't even touch the patient very much. There are very few needles involved, but somehow the babies flip, and she says, I don't know how you do it, but you just do it. It's like magic.
Oh, it's very interesting.
It's fascinating. And in Brigham and Women's, in fact, in many hospitals, they offer it now. And the documented success rate is 85% of a breech baby being flipped with the use of acupuncture.
Mm-hmm. So do you think, in the next 5-10 years, there's going to be more communication, more working together between complementary medicine providers and Western medicine providers?
I think it's going to take less than that, because now you'll be hard pressed to find an insurance company that doesn't cover acupuncture. Mm-hmm. I think it's a matter of educating the public that the benefit is there. Very often people come to us for chiropractic or for nutrition, and we check the benefits and we say, do you know you also have 20 visits a year of acupuncture? And they say, no, I do not. But I think as people become more aware and they take more advantage of it, they will communicate to their physicians and the dialogue will begin. I think it's already begun, but not as full stream as I'd like to see it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, I have to say, Irina, this has been incredibly educational. It's been really interesting. You're an amazing teacher. This is something I can say I knew very little about, but I can say I think I learned a lot, especially that my health insurance now apparently covers acupuncture.
Yeah. Well, and also literally as of January 22nd of 2022, Mass Health began to cover acupuncture.
Really?
Yeah.
So then essentially everyone in Massachusetts with any type of health insurance has access to acupuncture.
Yep. Yeah, it's very infrequent now. Like some subdivisions of Blue Cross, some subdivisions of United Heart Pilgrim do not cover it, but for the most part, all of them do. There are limitations. And with Mass Health, because it's so new, I believe I've only billed one claim to Mass Health, and there are reports I need to do, which I haven't done yet. I don't know how. I need to do some research. But yeah, some insurance companies limit to just the treatment of pain. Others do not. They just say acupuncture. So things like infertility, insomnia, fatigue, skin conditions, digestion, just about anything can be addressed and covered by insurance.
And I imagine you work with patients to figure whether or not they qualify for insurance to be paid through insurance.
So what we can do from our standpoint is to check the person's benefits. When somebody calls, let's say they're interested in physical therapy and they clearly have pain, we check if insurance covers it. And we just know that anybody with any kind of pain, it doesn't matter what type of pain it is, they will greatly benefit from acupuncture. We suggest it to this patient. But the way I built my practice is that 8 practitioners can work together on one client under one roof. And very often people come and spend 5 or 6 hours in our office, moving from one room to the next. They get a massage, they get a chiropractic adjustment, they get an acupuncture, etc., which is what gives that non-invasive complete health care.
And if there is something that is above your pay grade, as you said, you're referring these patients to seeing their primary care physicians, to going to urgent care, to going to hospitals.
Oh, absolutely. If somebody has uneven pupils, or if somebody is in distress, if somebody is about to give birth in my office, yes, you need to go to a fully equipped medical facility like right now. No, I never take chances, of course, but for the most part, we get people, somebody is crying, somebody has an acute migraine, I can fix it very quickly.
This is amazing. I'm inspired by the fact that you're out there in the community, providing this care for people, providing opportunities to link them in with, Western medicine practices, and you're finding people who are referring back to you. I think that's really inspiring to figuring out, how we create this, 360-degree healthcare for patients. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much for allowing me to do a speech.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. Definitely my pleasure. And so later today, everyone, we will have a dance class, Afrobeat class with Anita Handy. This will be at, I believe, 3 o'clock, but you can always find the whole schedule on the Black Project website. And as we stated before, of course, the views and opinions expressed by presenters in all of these lectures are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of the organizing entities. Thank you all. It's been a pleasure. We'll see you later. Hopefully you tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell people you see on the street to join us, and we can turn this thing into an annual thing. Recordings will be available soon. All right. Thank you all so very much. You all have a blessed day.